You're listening to The Phillip Jordan Show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in on this Wednesday to The Phillip Jordan Show here on Wiregrass Daily News Sports. I am your host, Phillip Jordan, in-studio host and producer of Nothing Was Football, 96.9 legend and Auburn writer for Last Word on college football. The Michigan Wolverines are the 2023 college football national champions. Your boy here picked that right earlier in the week on Monday's show. Kind of a dominated performance. They dominated the run game, and they got pressure on Michael Penix. It was pretty much their game start to finish. Got a little close. Got a couple times, 17-10 at halftime, 20-13 there in the fourth quarter. But Michigan pulled away. Really felt like they could have beat Washington by more than they did. But on today's show, I will be joined by John Vogel, NFL draft analyst, host of the Sick podcast with Draft Vogel. So we will be breaking the game down with John in just a few moments, and also we'll look at some pro prospects with John as well. And also we'll look at some defensive coordinator openings at both Alabama and Auburn, the Tennessee Titans and Atlanta Falcons making new head coach hires, and much, much more here on today's edition of the Phillip Jordan Show. You can check out the Phillip Jordan Show podcast over at wiregrassdailynews.com or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you are just a straight-up hater. You can email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com. Everybody, as promised on the top of the show, I am joined by John Vogel, a long-time friend. We hadn't done this in a while. We hadn't talked with John in a bit, but NFL draft analyst, and you check him out on his podcast, the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel. We're going to be talking all about Michigan's 34-13 win over Washington. But John, appreciate the time. I hope you're doing well.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on, dude. Always a good opportunity to chat with you. And yeah, it has been a while. I'm glad that we're doing this. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm always used to having an SEC team to talk about in these games. Just for you, and of course, you look at a lot of this stuff through the lens of the NFL draft, prospects, stuff like that. But was there a part of you that missed not having an SEC team in this kind of game?
Yeah, I think we all know that if Georgia was there, they were going to win it, right? We heard Florida State, crying and whining all year, at least since the playoff committee dropped the top 4, that they should have been there. And Georgia had every right to be there as well. And they just didn't say anything. They went out and took care of business. But looking at that game, it's clear that Georgia would have beat either one of those teams. But hey, every once in a while, I guess the SEC can't continue to dominate all the time. Otherwise, it's not interesting. And we got a 12-team playoff coming up. So who cares how this one ended up? But no, it is interesting because we are used to that SEC team always being there, and this time we're watching the Pac-12 that's dying, and the last game they're ever going to play in with the Big Ten.
Yeah, I joked with my guest on Monday's show, Dustin Shooter, who covers the Big Ten for Sports Illustrated. I said, I guess it's technically an all Big Ten title since Washington's coming into the conference. Because I would have said the same thing if Alabama and Texas played. I said, this is an all SEC championship. So, we would have went ahead and ducked all that. So, but, you look at it, and I thought, before I tell you what my thoughts were going to the game, what was your expectations going into the game? How did you think it was going to
go? I have some really good friends, that do this stuff for a living. They bet on it. They bet on this stuff. And pretty much everybody told me the same thing, which is Michigan was probably going to win this game. So I think my prediction was Michigan by 10. I thought they'd pull it off. It would be about in that range. I thought Washington would be able to move the ball enough on them. But what we saw was an absolute domination. They just took out Penix. They kept pressure on him and disrupted his natural timing. So, and then even by the end of the game, it was pitiful. It was watching him he was so freaking hurt. Probably shouldn't have been playing at that point, but kept on going. But no, I thought Michigan would win by 10. I thought that, Washington hadn't seen a defense quite like theirs yet, especially not a defensive line. And I thought that Washington hadn't seen a run offense like Michigan's. And I expected Michigan to come in there and play ball control. and be able to do so really well. But 21, I was not quite anticipating.
Yeah, I know. I felt like last week after the two semifinals, especially after Washington, Texas, everybody saw what Penix did in the passing game. I said, I think everybody fell in love with that. And look, that's the sexy part of football. Everybody loves to see the air show, throws down the field, the points. It's exciting. But I want you guys, as much as I love talking about quarterbacks, I always look at line of scrimmage. Who do I think's better? And I was kind of in that mindset going into the game. I felt like, seeing what Michigan needs Alabama. I know Alabama's offensive line does not peak Alabama, but still, what they did last week and then how they like to lean on you with their running game. I just thought that was where Michigan had the advantage, and that's kind of where I always go with these big games. Who's the better team up front? Who's going to win the line of scrimmage?
And that's what we saw with Michigan. They dominated both sides of the line of scrimmage, and they did it all year. They've got a bunch of guys that are going to go play in the NFL on those defensive lines. They got a sophomore right now that if he was eligible, he'd be a first-round draft pick in Kenneth Grant. But, their offensive line, they even missing Zach Zinter, they had the depth to continue to play with them and continue to go down the line, and that's what they did. They were crazy deep, on both of those lines. So I think that was physical dominance, and then to have a stable running backs like they have, and Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, it's unbelievable to watch. It's always fun when you got a dominant team like that. They can put together that kind of talent, especially nowadays with the running backs wanting to go play more and beating bell cow and always hitting the transfer portal. And these guys, they stuck with it. Blake Corum had an opportunity to go to the NFL last year and be potentially a second-round draft pick, and he decides to come back and sets the Michigan touchdown record in career and single season. You can't help but feel good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Donovan Edwards, he was kind of like this guy last year when Blake Corum got hurt, and then we kind of didn't see much from him this season. Man, this game he had a 46-yard touchdown run and a 41-yard touchdown run. And early on in the game, was it as simple as Michigan's offensive line and these running backs were just super talented, or was there something maybe schematically or something X's and O's you saw that Michigan was doing to equate to that success?
Well, it's just field vision, right? As a running back, when you look at Edwards' first touchdown run when he popped the 41-yard run off, it was a little inside zone, running up the middle. And there wasn't anything there. He's able to bounce it outside after all the Washington defenders have already committed. So once you bounce it outside and you've got the secondary support already moving toward the pile, you got to completely turn around and run back up the field, and you're not going to be able to do that. And that's kind of what happened there. And then the 46-yard run, Edwards is just he's just more physical. He's just faster.
Yeah.
Corum is a physical little running back. So. I don't think they did anything necessarily X's and O's that popped. It was just really, you've got better athletes, you're more physical up front, and Washington didn't know how to handle that.
You talked about Penix, and they got pressure on him. Carolina did last week with Jalen Milroe. They got pressure on the quarterback. What were, outside of that, what were some of the struggles? Because obviously they could not hit the deep play either, which Michigan's got a really good secondary. And I brought it up somebody last week. Look, maybe Michigan hasn't gone up against this many talented receivers of this level before, but they're used to it dealing with Ohio State. They've gone up against NFL level receivers before in the Big Ten with Ohio State. But what did you see there with Michigan's defense versus the Washington offense?
Schematically, yeah, defensively, what Michigan was kind of doing was, a lot of what Washington runs is based on timing. When you throw deep ball concepts, especially, with the vertical stuff that Washington likes to run, if you get up in there and you disrupt them initially and you throw them off of their routes, you throw them off their rhythm, that could be a lot for them to handle, especially when you got, Penix, who's not a guy that normally operates very well outside of rhythm, outside of, keeping the offensive structure. If you have to move him off of his platform, he's going to struggle. And that's what we kind of seen, when you looked at the Oregon games. Oregon's defense slowed that offense down when they were able to pressure him. There's just not many teams were able to get that kind of pressure on him consistently enough to disrupt the offense. And so, when you jam the receivers, you play some press coverage, you do some different things like that, you play physical, which Michigan secondary is more than capable of doing. that kind of allowed them to be disruptive and throw Penix off and allow the pressure to get home, because now his sight picture is destroyed. He's used to seeing something. He's used to seeing one thing. Maybe it's okay. We saw a lot of too high this year, and that's what we typically play against. And now they're showing me different looks. There's a little bit of disguise coverage just because Michigan does that a little bit. So it's just enough to just disrupt the rhythm and the timing of what they're typically doing. And that's what allowed them to kind of build that lead there, especially when they got to the end when they beat up Penix.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird game too, because it felt like the whole game Michigan was dominating. But at halftime, it's 17-10, and then it's 20-13 early in the fourth quarter. But of course, Michigan pulled away at the end. It was just kind of like, do you think Michigan was kind of like taking their foot off the gas pedal a little bit? I mean, how was Washington still they were still in it going into the fourth quarter?
Yeah, there was I had said something, I think, on Twitter, X, whatever we call it now, at that point. And it was like they were play calling. Michigan's offense was play calling not to lose. And they were losing a lot of that aggression that they normally play with. I mean, if you go back to the key moments of the last 3 or 4 Michigan games, where the game became decisive, was the Ohio State game, the Alabama game last week, and even this game, it was when they got aggressive, when they got outside the box. That's when they were able to strike and build those leads and be that dominant team. What we saw was in those couple quarters there, they just were not being they weren't being aggressive. They were slowing down, just trying to, typical stuff, run the ball up the middle, try to just whatever, you run the time, run the clock out. And I think I said that. And I said, if they keep calling plays like this, they're going to give Washington a chance. You don't want to give Penix a chance like that. But, they opened up there in that fourth quarter in that first drive that they had when they got the ball back and they went down the field. They pulled up a couple really good aggressive plays, hit the tight end, what's his name, Lovelace or something like that, 18, hit him down the field on a really nice little wheel design with some misdirection and cool stuff to it. So once that's the thing about Michigan this year, is once they got aggressive and they got outside of that normal, how they run their offense, they were really good.
So let's talk about these quarterbacks. And look, we kind of mentioned it after last week. A lot of people excited talking about Michael Penix and what they did. And I saw a lot of people on social media say, man, this guy should be ranked higher when it comes to the quarterback prospects coming out after what we saw against Texas. And Texas is a really good defense. So that was an impressive performance last week. But where are you on Michael Penix as an NFL prospect?
He's impossible to project right now, Phillip. And it's because there's so much that's unknown about his medical situation. He played 4 years at Indiana, and in every single one of those 4 years, he ended with a season-ending injury, an AC joint, a shoulder, and then 2 ACLs. So that's going to be huge. When he goes to the combine, he gets his medical checkup. The results of that is going to determine really where he goes in the draft. If he's got clear medicals and he's good to go, I could see him going second. He might even sneak into the end of the first round. But now if he doesn't, I can see 5th, 6th, 7th round really pushing toward the back end of the draft, because when you have a bad medical situation, it's so much harder for teams to want to invest that kind of money in you. But I think that there's going to be a few concerns. Everybody thought that he was a really accurate deep ball thrower, and he can be. It's just when you get him, when you disrupt him, and you get, like I said, you move him off his platform, he really struggles to just operate. He really needs the offense to be in sync. He needs everything to be in motion. Very Kirk Cousins-esque, like where we watch him put up all these great numbers and does an awesome job, throws the ball all over the yard, but as soon as you disrupt him and you get pressure on him, he struggles. That's kind of Michael Penix at this point. So I think that's kind of the big question with him. On top of just the extended release, I mean, it takes him a long time to throw the ball, to get it out of his hand. That's kind of a concern if you're an NFL franchise, because if you already got a guy that can't operate outside of pressure, now he's got an extended release on top of that. Now we're talking about hanging onto the ball too long, and there's all kinds of issues that come up with that in terms of just trying to scheme an offense and operate within it.
And then on the other side, because I do see people talk very highly of J.J. McCarthy. And, of course, he doesn't get asked to do a lot with Michigan. But when he's asked to do stuff, he usually performs pretty well. He did so in these 2 playoff games. What are your thoughts on him?
I think he needs to go back for another year. And I know that there's a lot of quarterbacks that went back for another year, right? And we have a lot of these sixth-year guys. There's a lot of NIL money that's floating around. People are cashing in those checks and, making a little extra money while they go back to school for another year. But with JJ, it's just the fact that we haven't seen him do more than what he's been asked to do. Mm-hmm. Granted, that's what you want in a quarterback, right? Hey, go out there, go do your stuff. But right now, JJ looks like a game manager who can create with his legs. He's a good athlete. He's got a pretty good arm. But we don't know what's going to do when what's going to happen when the game is on the line. You need a game-winning drive. You're down by 7. Go the length of the field. No timeouts. What are you going to do? How are you going to perform in that situation? We haven't seen that, So I think, there's so much that's uncertain right now with Michigan in general. Jim Harbaugh, does he come back? Is he about to go somewhere else? I've heard rumors about him going to high school at this point, which nothing would surprise me, Yeah. I think high school is a simpler level. If you think about it, he went from the NFL to college back when college football was a lot simpler. It's not simple anymore. So it makes you wonder, is he kind of starting to get older? Does he want to go back to high school? What does he have to prove at this point? Does he really want to go back to the NFL? I guess we're going to find out. But, if he goes back without JJ, Harbaugh there, and then still continues to ball out, I think that would help his prospectus a lot.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It'll be interesting with a lot of stuff. Of course, everybody needs to follow John, check him out when it comes to the NFL draft. But, John, tell everybody, the listeners and viewers, where they can find you online if they want to check you out.
Yeah, so we've been working with NFL Draft Lounge for my writing content. So just put out my mock draft and some initial notes on the Hula Bowl this week because the All-Star Circuit's getting underway. And then obviously you mentioned it when we came in, man, the Sick Podcast, John Vogel. We do a lot of breakdowns on, not just really so much players, but how to scout and different things like that. Sick Podcast Network is they're an awesome partner. Absolutely love working with them and have a ton of respect for all those guys that work up there at the top, especially Sammy and AC. But check it. You don't need to just check me out on there. We got a lot of really great hosts. Adam Ranks on there, a lot of really great hockey guys too. Go check them out as well.
All right, everybody, go check out John. And John, I appreciate the time and look forward to doing some time. We got to get into some other quarterbacks as we get into draft season.
It sounds great, Phillip. Let's do it.
96.9 The Legend is your connection to classic country legends. But Digio Strategies has other options too. News Talk 103.9 is your source for America's top news and entertainment shows like Rick and Bubba in the morning, Glenn Beck from 9 till 11 a.m., and Clay Travis and Buck Sexton middays from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. Sean Hannity, Lars Larson, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, and others fill your day with the latest news and views from America's top conservative voices. America at Night and Coast to Coast AM keep you company and connected throughout the night. Plus, Fox News, the Alabama Radio Network, and Wiregrass Daily News keep you informed with national, international, state, and local news. And with more musical choices like All the Hits, 106.7 KMX, Today's Country, 95.5 WTVY, and Music 107.7. Digio Strategies gives you more choices and more variety. Listen on air, online, and on our apps. 96.9 The Legend is just the beginning.
All right, and once again, thanks to John Vogel for coming on today's edition of the Phillip Jordan Show right here on Wiregrass Daily News Sports. And we'll have John on later on to talk more NFL draft stuff, SEC, Alabama, Auburn, some quarterback stuff later on. It is the All-Star Circuit's going to be kicking in here pretty soon, NFL playoffs, so still plenty of football stuff to discuss, and transfer portal and all coaching movement and all that stuff. So plenty to talk about. Just because the college football season is over does not mean there's not stuff we can discuss. And let's jump into it. Some Auburn news. On Monday, defensive coordinator Ron Roberts' story came out. He will be headed to Florida to be co-defensive coordinator and linebacker coach for the Gators. Florida struggled at times. They were on defense, so it'll be interesting what he does there. Under Roberts in his 1 year at Auburn, Auburn was ranked 45th nationally in yards allowed and 41st in points allowed. With Charles Kelly coming on staff, that has not been officially announced, I don't believe, though, by Auburn. One would assume he would be the new defensive coordinator, but we shall see. Now, Zach Blackerby over at Sports Illustrated, he put out 3 names that you could see as the new Auburn defensive coordinator. Chris Kiffin, brother of Lane Kiffin. Chris and Hugh Freeze worked together there at Ole Miss. So that's a possibility. Charles Kelly, of course, and Zach Arnett. And in Zach's story over at Sports Illustrated, Auburn Daily, he did mention the fact that Auburn Undercover has mentioned that this is a name. Zach Arnett is one being discussed. Of course, he was just the head coach at Mississippi State for 1 year. Got fired after replacing the late, great Mike Leach. Didn't work out as head coach, but he is a really good defense coordinator. So that may be another name to look out for. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, Chris Slow of ESPN put this out on X this weekend that said that Hugh Freeze will call plays per sources to ESPN. This is not surprising. This is what Hugh Freeze has done pretty much everywhere he's been as a head coach, and he didn't do it this past year at Auburn, but you could tell he got more involved in it. But we'll see. That I think Auburn fans should be excited about that. Hugh Freeze calling play because, hey, what he has done offensively as a play caller is a big reason why he got hired. So, and Auburn ranked 11th in SEC in scoring offense, so they really want that to get better, and quarterback play to get better, which I still think Auburn needs to jump in the portal for that. Good news on the defense side of the ball. We're going to jump back over there for Auburn. Keontae Scott will not enter the portal. We talked about this last week that it was looking like he was going to the portal, but he put this on X. Thankful for the patience and honest opinions, but the real know where home is for me. Hashtag RDE, War Eagle. So he will be returning to Auburn, which is big because Auburn is pretty thin in what they have coming back in the secondary with DJ James, Nehemiah Pritchett, Zion Puckett, Jalen Simpson, all headed for the NFL draft. On the Alabama side of things, defense coordinator Kevin Steele will be retiring at the age of 66 after 1 year returning to Alabama, but this was his third stint with the Tide, his 40th year in coaching and 13th in the SEC. Remember, he also served as defense coordinator under Gus Malzahn at Auburn. They were second in scoring defense and 16th nationally there. And according to AL.com's Matt Stahl, he put out an article on some potential replacements. In-house, Travarius Robinson, who was cornerbacks coach for them, Lane Kiffin, accused Alabama, or speculated, whichever word you want to use, early in the year that Robinson was actually the one calling the defensive plays there for Alabama. And then Charlie Strong, who's on staff as analyst. Of course, remember him as the head coach at Louisville and at other spots, Texas, of course, and also had a successful run as defense coordinator, Florida and South Carolina, won a national championship as a defense coordinator for Florida Gators. So we'll see what happens there. Outside, Glenn Schulman over at Georgia, which Will Muschamp's there as well. See if we can get that tie going. DJ Durkin, who is not currently on staff anywhere, but he was on staff with Jimbo Fisher with Texas A&M this past year. Zach Arnett and Charles Kelly, another name that have been mentioned. We'll see if Charles Kelly would he spurn his alma mater to go to the Crimson Tide. That would be quite interesting. Running back Jace McClellan announced he will be headed to the NFL. In his career at Alabama, he had 1,981 yards, 18 touchdowns. This year, his best year, he had 809 yards, 8 touchdowns. Of course, he did not play in the SEC Championship game. He got injured against Auburn, but he had a touchdown against Michigan in the Rose Bowl last week when Alabama lost 27-20. For Troy, some transfer news for them. Defensive back Cecil Powell from NC State has committed to the Trojans. Also, Gardner Webb, linebacker Brandon Jackson, and 2 players from East Carolina, running back Gerald Green and linebacker Rod Dilworth are headed to Troy. Some overall SEC news, big news here. Running back transfer. Former Ole Miss running back Quinshon Judkins, he'll be headed to Ohio State. Of course, they just added Will Howard there. So they're not liking Michigan, their arch rival, winning a championship. So now it looks as if that is now the direction where they're going. So be interesting to watch Ohio State now with these additions if you're interested on the SEC, on college football, the national scale of things. Over NFL, this was released after I had recorded Monday's episode. Full disclosure, recorded that about 9:30, 10 o'clock on Sunday night. But the Atlanta Falcons did fire Arthur Smith on Sunday. I think a lot of people may have seen this coming. It was a rough go in their final game against the hated New Orleans Saints. That's a rivalry game for these two teams. He was 7-10 this year, 21-30 overall, 7-10 all 3 seasons. They lost 17-48 to New Orleans on Sunday. I just think his first year he did have Matt Ryan. That didn't work. In these last 2 years, I think the next year there was some overachieving there. You had Desmond Ridder, which is a rookie quarterback. But this year, I think quarterback was reason. Desmond Ridder and also Taylor Heineke just going back and forth with that. Uncommitted quarterback, not really developing that position where you would want it. I think that really hurt Arthur Smith there with the Falcons. And so now we'll see where they go with their head coaching search and who they can find. They've got good skill position players. They have some pieces there in Atlanta that could be a playoff team. They just need to find a quarterback. And I don't really, to be a playoff team, I don't believe they need to have a franchise-changing quarterback. Just need to increase or upgrade in that position. And we'll see what happens. And a lot of that depends who's the next head coach and where Atlanta wants to go with that. And then on Tuesday, the Tennessee Titans fired Mike Vrabel. I was kind of surprised by this, to be honest with you. I think Mike Vrabel's a really good coach. 54-45 overall with 2 playoff wins, but the last 2 years have not gone well. In 2022, they went 7-10. They started 7-3. They lost 7 in a row to end the year. This past year, 6-11. Again, injuries to Ryan Tannehill. You go Will Levis. You saw some flashes, but also the roster is just not as good as it once was. You got to think Derrick Henry's not going to be there next year. Obviously, Ryan Tannehill's not. Will Levis is their future. That's where they're going to go with. So we'll see what they want to do at that position as well. And I'm going to read a quote for you guys. And apologize if you're watching online. I will be reading it off my cellular device. I got it here queued up. Earlier today, I spoke with Mike Vrabel and told him about my decision to make a change at head coach. Owner Amy Adams-Strunk said in a statement on Tuesday. And I got this from over at NFL.com. As I told Coach Vrabel, this decision was as difficult as any I've made as controlling owner. I appreciate my contributions to the Tennessee Titans, both on and off the field. Anyone who has ever met him knows how passionate and genuine he is, and he's been a strong supporter of the Nashville community. We wish Mike, Jen, and the Vrabel family nothing but the best in the future. And she also had this to say in that article as well. As the NFL continues to innovate and evolve, I believe the teams best positioned for sustained success will be those who empower and align a collaborative team across football functions. Adams-Strunk said in a statement on Tuesday. Last year, we began a shift in our approach to football leadership and made several changes to our personnel to advance that plan. As I continue to assess the state of our team, I arrived at the conclusion our team would also benefit from the fresh approach and perspective of a new coaching staff. I believe the Tennessee Titans can and will be a premier National Football League franchise. It's what our fans deserve, and there will be hard decisions along the way. My decision today is not only a reflection of its disappointment in our past 2 seasons, but also my recognition that further changes are necessary to fully achieve our vision. Look, you hit the right coach, and Will Levis works, and you get enough players around this team, you can win the AFC South next year. I mean, there's some questions around Jacksonville. I'm starting to kind of wonder if Trevor Lawrence really is a franchise quarterback. He has these great throws in these tremendous games, but he also disappoints you as well. He'll be going to year 4 next year. The Texans, now that's the thing you got to watch out with C.J. Stroud. They win the division in year 1 with him as quarterback and DeMeco Ryans as head coach. And the Colts, look out for them too. Anthony Richardson, they almost made the playoffs with Gardner Minshew playing most of the year after Anthony Richardson got hurt early in the year. So we shall see what's going on with that. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Once again, thanks to John Vogel for coming on and joining me and talking about the National Championship game on Monday night. I'll be back on Friday. I'm going to do the show differently on Friday. I'm going to start with the open and news stuff and then do the guest. But what we will be discussing on Friday with the guest, Matt Barbado, I've been talking to this guy for years, radio, podcast. He's a writer for the Betting Pros and Fantasy Pros. We will preview Super Wildcard Weekend National Football League. I know you guys are probably mostly college fans, but you know good well you'll be watching NFL playoffs. So we will preview that. But I think I'm also going to give my top 10 college football teams for 2024. And we'll see. We'll work on that. But it should be fun. Really looking forward to having that conversation with Matt. Anyways, I hope everybody has a great Wednesday. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast available over Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you are on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight up hater. You can also check out the show over at wiregrassdailynews.com. You can email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com and check out all my written work over at Last Word on college football. And send an email, send a question. I'm always for that too as well. Anyways, I appreciate the time for all you guys checking out the show. And you have been listening and watching the Phillip Jordan Show on Wiregrass Daily News Sports.